Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Salesforce Simplified. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Today is February 7th, 2024. I'll hit you guys with my commercial real quick. If you're a Salesforce customer, and there are a ton of them, and you're not getting the value out of the platform that you should be, well, it's not because of the platform. It's because you're not getting the right assistance, and that's why XenTegra has invested in building out a Salesforce practice, and Derek Cassese, formerly of Salesforce, is running that practice. Derek's with me. Derek, how's it going?
It's going well, going real good.
Have you had a chance to help a customer this week with
I
Salesforce?
have.
Give me an example of what their problem was and what you did for them.
Well, it's a current project, but like it's actually related to what we're going to talk about today. But with any project, you've got to do impact analysis, and we're helping them really understand all the pieces and pieces of their org that are related to a single field on the opportunity. And giving customers insights and showing them how to find things, et cetera. Just is really something that it's fun for me to help people feel better. And when they're like, "Oh, I get it now," it's a cool feeling to make sure that we're helping people like that.
The platform makes sense. It's just helping people make sense of the platform. Does that make sense?
Yes, it is. Yep, yep. There's a lot of situations where you've heard it before, but they don't know what they don't know. But it's very true in the world of Salesforce in that there's so much to know that it's almost impossible to know what to ask sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's why a partnership matters. That's why you've got to have, a relationship with the vendor, in this case, Salesforce, a relationship with a value-added reseller partner, managed service provider, support organization, and then the customer needs to be treated like they're, part of that equation, equally as part of that equation. In fact, probably elevated in that conversation. The blog you brought forward today, I have no idea what this is about, so I'm going to learn about here. Why every Salesforce org, every Salesforce organization needs a center of excellence. This is by Ian Gotts from November of 2020. I'm assuming that even though it's 4 years old, 3 years old at this point, 4 years old, 3 years old, that the relevance is still just as important. I'll just start with the very first line and then let you run with it. The summary starts, which is interesting. The summary's in the beginning. Salesforce was a Ford Focus. Now it's an Aston Martin GTE race car. Help me make sense of that, and which one of those do customers need?
yeah, so this is I'm really intrigued by this whole concept here, and it is a 2020 article, but it is even more relevant today, in my opinion, probably than it was back in 2020. So the idea behind this, in the summary section of this, it's like a summary and then a summary of another article that we'll get to. So there's like a couple summaries here. But what we're saying is that back in the day when Salesforce started, it was a very tactical app for automating Salesforce, like a Salesforce automation app, right? And it has grown to what we know now as a customer experience platform that is strategic across an organization, right? So you go from a tactical, very like point A to point B to something with all kinds of bells and whistles that do way more than just a tactical solution, point solution with customers spending, upwards of $20 million a year on this thing, which is the Ford Focus to Aston Martin GTE race car analogy, right?
Do you find situations where people are paying for an Aston Martin race car or an Aston Martin in general, and they are getting the performance of a Ford Focus?
Well, yeah, and that's part of kind of what we're going to talk about in this article. And it's ironic because for the reasons that a lot of customers get into Salesforce, and the success of Salesforce is actually the reason why customers are experiencing issues and pain and struggling to innovate and add things to their environment, etc. So let's get into that. So the summary is basically just kind of drawing that analogy that we've come a long way. You've got the whole ecosystem of trailblazers that are, learning the whole platform on Trailhead, and they're implementing really interesting things and etc. But we've gotten to a point where, because it's so strategic, the penalty of it failing is significant. right? It's not just a tactical point solution now that doesn't work for somebody in the corner office somewhere. It's, you're losing revenue. You're not able to take orders. You're not able to close deals. It's extremely impactful. So I have it's every single org I've ever gone into. I've seen this technical debt. What do I mean by that? Technical debt of just old ways of implementing things, maybe prior to Salesforce coming out with a standard way of doing something, or legacy managed packages that are no longer being used, or maybe an old App Exchange app that was purchased before a solution was built, or custom flows that do 400 things when an opportunity is saved, is inhibiting customers from actually innovating and doing more with the platform. Because you know that if you touch that deck of cards, it's going to potentially fall. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And, people probably know that's their, in fact, I've talked to several people recently, they know that's their organization and they know they got to do something to fix it before it gets worse.
Yeah. And so what this article is really trying to paint the picture of, though, is that this is it's a solved problem in other ecosystems, right? So it's not like a unique situation. So it's solved in ecosystems where the implementation is more mature. We're just at that tipping point right now where orgs are starting to get crazy. Like just the number of custom objects, the number of fields, reports, process builders that need to be moved to flow, and flows that are doing all kinds of stuff that are custom. It's just getting to a point where the success of the platform has gotten you where you are, but now you're at a point where it takes forever to make a change, right? So now that whole reason you bought in the platform, because it was fast and agile and quick and you could do all kinds of stuff, is now evaporating, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Is one of the solutions is to adopt the concept of a center of excellence. There's other ways of approaching it, but that's what this article is discussing. And the whole concept, you scroll down, when we get into growing pains, the author is basically describing their initial use of Salesforce and how it was easy, and they built, they had 285 custom objects. They ran all aspects of their organization. It was their core platform, and everything was fine. It was the early days in 2001, and things were just working. And 20 years later, it's got a lot more moving pieces, and it's just much more difficult if you've got a mature org to add and change and make updates, right? So we talk about warning signs. If you scroll down, this is where we talk about the Forrester report. So somebody listening to this podcast might be aware or may have read, back in 2017, Forrester wrote an article called Salesforce at Scale Dilemma. And I came about this topic in a video that I was watching from a partner called Elements Cloud, which I'll get into at some point later in this podcast, where they reference this article of Salesforce at Scale Dilemma. And what it is it's what I've been talking about, right? So you love Salesforce, you buy it, you love how it's extremely productive, you can develop your own stuff. The initial success breeds demand for more, right? You add more departments, say, oh, I want to do this. I want to do commissions out of it. I want to do invoicing out of it. I want to do quoting. I want to add other aspects to it. Okay, now new custom apps come in, new custom objects come in, new custom fields come in, right? And the complexity and scale increases, but yet crushes the responsiveness of the environment, right? So as it grows, the innovation slows and the flexibility completely evaporates. And that's the dilemma, right? That Forrester published back in 2017. That's what this author is discussing, in that there is a way to address this, and we have to start addressing this now. And why I want to talk about it is because I feel like as a Salesforce partner, when I go in and I'm looking at a customer's environment and I see all of this technical debt, and I see process builders that aren't moved, and I see no consistency in any way, shape, or form on naming conventions, and just it's just kind of all over the place. I know immediately where they're heading, and it's not a good place, because it's going to get to a point where they're either going to do, and this is discussed down further, but they're going to one of three things are going to happen. They're either going to have to they're either going to basically lose all ROI on the whole platform, because it's just going to be, they're going to be standing still. They're not going to be able to add anything to it. And that will lead to either a large cleanup project or a brand new org where they'll have to just move everything to, or they'll just jump ship completely and blame the platform, right? But that, we all know that's not the issue. It's just there are so many levers, so many Lego blocks, if you will, that you've gotten yourself kind of in a corner, right? So the Forrester report kind of goes through, and I'm not going to read it word for word, but as you get to a point where, and they list it there, right? It becomes unresponsive, a costly cleanup project is launched, the org is thrown away or replaced by a new org or a different platform, right? Now, check this out. This is what I thought was really interesting. So they analyzed 1 billion org metadata items. So if you're not familiar, Salesforce, the metadata, Salesforce is split between your data and the metadata. And that's how it's so powerful. The metadata, it describes the configuration of your Salesforce org. And so they looked at the metadata, not the actual data, but they looked at the metadata of these orgs, and they found that this technical debt is at like crippling levels. So a couple orgs had 250,000 reports, 50,000 email templates. Somebody had 400 record types. There was one, okay, here's the one, 100 managed packages installed in an org, 18 million cases. And then they got to one where an org had 10 million task records. And they were like, that's insane. But then the next week they found one with 114 million task records.
And Derek, these are probably organizations that have a full-time Salesforce administrator, and they think they're doing the right thing because they're just off creating and creating and creating, and really they're creating a mess.
Yeah, and it's you do what you do, right? So you're comfortable. It's not really quote unquote broken, but you can't. You're just not able to add things, right? You may be afraid to change a formula field, like right now, right? We just recently got an update from Salesforce, the 3 times a year. One of the updates is the ability to use the dynamic forms on an object of related objects. What does that mean? That means that I can actually pull in a field from the opportunity onto an account page. So now I can get rid of all my formula fields that used to do that. But those formula fields are probably in a gazillion reports, and those formula fields are probably used in flows. So now you want to use this new innovation from Salesforce, but you can't because you'd break 400 things.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So you got this situation where you've got to kind of slow down, back up, and figure out how to address the situation. Right. And so now conversation kind of flips, right? What do you do? Right. You're in this situation. Like, what are we going to do? And that's where the author kind of goes along kind of with an analogy of an Aston Martin GTE race car team, right? It takes this entire team to win a race. Like there's tons of people involved and each one of them is specialized in certain areas. And so that's where we get into the concept of a center of excellence, right? So and that's been around, right? And people listening to this are probably, some may be rolling their eyes. Oh, here we go, another team, another group. Sure. I mean, there are some negative connotations around COEs. There are some very positive things around center of excellence. The characteristics of a good center of excellence, and they talk about it in this article, right? Is got best leadership, it's got sponsors, the best tools, and they kind of go back and forth, right? So the leadership, CIO, CRM owner, right? The best sponsors would be budget and investment. The best tools, right, would be business analysts, DevOps, analytics, change management, all that in place. So you're not just creating things on the fly. And then, the best team, qualified project managers, again, business analysts, architects, admins, developers, change managers. And that's where the team right there, that's where I think partners can play a much bigger role, is helping customers wrap their minds around what does this look like. And it doesn't have to be all in-house people on these teams, right? And maybe it's better if it's not, because you're not, you're coming at it with a different mindset to try to say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What is the end goal? And maybe there's a much better way to accomplish that in your org rather than adding more technical debt, adding more custom code, adding custom Apex, whatever it is that you were going to do. That is adding to that technical debt that makes it so hard to be agile and add innovation and innovative pieces to this thing, right?
I think it'd be fair to add one line to this. It says a third party that brings whatever you didn't have to this equation.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it could be your
Yeah.
organization. You're missing 3 or 4 of these. Third party needs to bring that. And let's say you're a larger organization. You have all of this, but the third party still needs to bring something to the mix because you can't have it all covered. If you do, you have it, from a very myopic view of it, that third party should bring in subject matter expertise just by experience.
Yeah, it really what it is. I mean, and you can do a search. If you do a search Salesforce COE, you're going to find a bunch of stuff. I mean, there's trailheads on it. There's all kinds of information around this concept, right? And at the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is not make decisions in a vacuum. We're not, and we don't want to be making decisions in a vacuum, but we also don't want to make like org-wide changes for tactical reasons that could impact the rest of the organization. So you have to have, you have to have all the stakeholders at the table. Everybody has to be aware of what's being done so that it's in unison, so that it's a finely tuned machine, right? Just like the car, right? You got like the guys in the engine need to work with the guys in the aerodynamic team, and like all the tires, all that stuff has to work together. It's not going to work.
Yeah. But right? I bet most organizations, just like in the article here, they just think they can go out and hire the best driver and then take their eyes off of it, and it will magically be what they expected it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is true too. I mean, I think this product has come so far that there may still be some people that feel like, hey, we can set it up and, make it do what we need it to do and we're good to go. But then that leads to, it is good to go. Let's add this. Okay, that's working. Let's add this. And then they're going to be exactly where everybody else is in 2 years, right?
Yep.
So the COE, again, what they're talking about is that this is a solved problem. It's happened, I believe, in the Oracle world, SAP world, like this is a situation that has been solved. And in the analysis of corporations that have deployed a concept of a COE, they're much more successful with getting rid of the technical debt, with keeping it from going off the rails, if you will. And I think it's hard because it's, everybody's busy with day to day, right? You're focused on whatever it is that your business is doing. You're focused on, bringing in revenue or achieving your goals. And it's like, this is an extra piece, right? And so it's like, it seems like overhead, but it's something that, in my opinion, needs to start happening in these environments, or unfortunately, it's going to be too difficult to untangle these orgs where you're just going to have to do one of those 3 things. You're really going to have to just jump ship and start a new org, which is just a daunting. I mean, that's almost impossible. And this is also, by the way, somebody listening, if you're still on Classic, this is why you're on Classic. If you're not on Lightning, like the reason you're not is because something will break and you're stuck there.
Yeah. And
that's exactly what we're talking about, is you're going to be stuck in a point in time at some point because you've got too much technical debt. And so I'm just going to plug right now that there are so XenTegra, right? Salesforce partner. We are here to educate customers. It's not just, hey, tell me what you want to do, Mr. Customer, and let me make money on a project. It's to educate on what could happen and what may happen and why you should do something and why it makes sense not to do something. And I think that partners need to play a bigger role in bringing the awareness to these things to customers.
So Derek, when you do one of your free micro assessments we do here, these types of concepts come up and you point out the ugly in their org?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to mention Elements Cloud here real quick, because so there are tools out there to help discover some of this, right? Like I've been mentioning technical debt a lot, and I've been using a tool that allows me, because it would be nearly impossible for one person or a team of people to just sift through the metadata and in a reasonable amount of time and understand what we're looking at. So there are tools that can go do that for us, and one of which is Elements Cloud, like I told you. And I'm using that to basically create reports and visually show customers what we're talking about, right? One area that I thought was pretty interesting was fault coverage and flows. So anybody that's written a flow, have you actually created a fault path? What is a fault path? It's a path where if there's an error, it knows, okay, go do these things instead of just blowing up. And the majority of the orgs I've seen has very low fault coverage, if any at all. And that's just one piece, right? So yeah, so that's like when I do the micro assessment, I'm probably giving way too much from a micro assessment, but I don't really care, because this is so important to the sustainability of successful Salesforce deployment, in my opinion, that I can't not tell them, right? I can't like look at an org and see these things and not bring it up. So that's why I'm just going to show all of this. And then what you can do is, I mean, because I don't think it's realistic to think that you can just have a conversation and a customer's going to go, all right, let's start a COE. I mean, that's a much larger organizational wide discussion. So what are some of the things you can do before that? Well, one of them is obviously, get a micro assessment, get somebody else outside the organization to look at what you're doing. Because, I remember as a programmer, I'd be stuck on something. I couldn't figure out how to make something work, and I'd stare at it for days. And I don't know if this ever happened, but you get away from it for like a week, and you sit back down and you look and you immediately see the problem. And it's just because you're too accustomed to it to see the problems, right? And that's why I think it's important to have third-party partners like XenTegra, or the partners you're working with, be a part of this to try to help clean this stuff up, bring the awareness to it. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can start right now, even if just reining in like how reports are handled and making sure you don't have report sprawl, and putting descriptions in custom fields so that somebody coming in knows what a field is actually doing and what it's for. I mean, I think it's very rare to think that anybody's putting a nice real description in a field. It's not happening. And it's because it takes another 20 seconds. And that adds up if you're creating 250 fields. But a year and a half from now, you're going to really wish you had put a description in there when you named it like something random, right? So that's what I think is the next steps. The COE is the ultimate, I think. It's backed by a lot of data, right? So if you create a center of excellence and you have governance and leadership and good methodologies and a project management office and good tooling products, then it's going to eventually start helping clean up some of this, right? You'll have projects to clean out some of the technical debt.
Dirk, are there sections of the article that I've kind of skipped around here? Like there's this where it lists out vision, leadership, governance.
These are so what you're looking at now is the section on the COE. So it's the key pillars of the Center of Excellence are vision, leadership, governance, change control, methodology, standards, metadata management, it's a big one, architecture, security, change management, PMO, tooling, and innovation. Now, that's a lot of stuff, but think about like making sure somebody is watching each one of those sections, right? Think of the difference that it would have on the platform that's basically holding the keys to your company, which is your customer data. So that's and you can like I said, if you do a Google on Salesforce COE, there's a lot of information out there on. And there's even a trail, I believe, on how you can go, what it is, and how you can start it, and et cetera.
How does this? So there's a chart below that has. Well, first of all, what do they define here? Small, medium, and large. Are these org sizes?
Yeah. So I think so what they're doing is they basically have small, medium, or large deployments, right? So it's essentially done where small or small admin teams with limited developers right, would be a small COE if that's where you fall. Like you don't need 30 people, right? But you're going to need you're going to need a fairly large group of people in the COE for somebody that has multi-cloud, multi-orgs, 30,000 users, that type of stuff, right? And what they did was certain areas of those pillars you can tick on or off based on your size, right? So somebody, for example, large has every one of those pillars we just mentioned ticked, right? But small has, governance, change control, methodology, change management, and tooling, right? As kind of represented as, what did they say the blue was? I gotta remember here. Needed, right? Blue is needed.
Yeah.
Purple's mandatory. So the mandatory aspects, there you go. The mandatory aspects in small are leadership, metadata management, architecture, and security. Those four for a small, which is what we just mentioned, right? Small group. And then they kind of go through adding, right? So if you get a little bit bigger, now you got to add change management and you add tooling to it.
Yeah.
And then once you get to the huge multi-org, you need it all, right? And this is just trying to help.
So I know you got a lot going on, and I know we're already giving away a lot of stuff for free with our micro assessment, our security assessment. But to me, a consult around center of excellence and walking through where a customer fits in this table and explaining each piece would be just extremely partner value add.
No, it would be, yeah, it would be very, very. I think that it would be a little eye-opening because you start thinking about the things that you're potentially not doing right now, or not looking at, or maybe just kind of ad hoc, right? And then absolutely thinking about what, and then so the other like side of the coin of this is, all right, so we create the COE, like what is it actually giving back to the company, right? Are we just creating another like change board bureaucracy where if I want something done, it's going to take an extra 4 weeks, that type of stuff? And I think that's why the vision of these needs to be very clearly articulated. And that's more like that's inside the company. I got to understand like what is the overall goal? What are you trying to achieve? Which is, what is the overall vision for the COE for Salesforce is to make sure that you may remain agile, sustainable, to meet the needs of your customers, right? And to make sure that you don't do anything that would inhibit that. So that, I think that's all, and that's where I believe like what you're saying, right? Partners can come in, that, have experience in these types of engagements where you're actually creating a COE with a customer. And that's where like the collaboration aspect of this is really fascinating because this isn't just like, hey, we're going to have a couple sessions and, you follow these check boxes and now you've got a COE, right? These are like in-depth discussions, understanding the moving pieces and really wrapping your arms around what is now a strategic platform as opposed to just a tactical piece of software.
Well, to me, would be valuable to a customer supporting their user customers. And what it might uncover is that the organization that you may be working with today does not want you to do this, because then it would highlight what you talked about a while ago, that they're really just coming in and doing what you tell them to do, which is potentially stacking onto the mess.
Yeah. Yep. And then, they go in and they've got some customer references on experiences that they have with setting up a COE. And again, there's a lot of data on this, on the success of creating one of these as it pertains to a complex environment that is Salesforce. And you could basically say this for any of these large platforms today, right? ServiceNow, another one. All these platforms start to get legs and start to add more pieces. Because they're not just like these companies, we're not just going to stand still, right? If a company's successful in one area, they're going to start doing M&A, they're going to start adding pieces, they're going to start bleeding into other areas, and then you start having the same problem. Just maybe not right now, but it will happen because these are all, a lot of these cloud platforms are all very configurable. I think that, I will stand by and say that I believe Salesforce is the most customizable, configurable platform on the planet. And because of that, we're talking about this right now. It's kind of a victim of its own success.
Yeah, they've made it that way on purpose.
Yes.
Really from day one. Well, guess what? That's how you end up with this.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Last section here says final word.
Yeah, so in the article from Forrester, which is where this whole thing kind of started, right? The Salesforce at scale dilemma. By the way, the at and that is the at symbol. Um, it says in here, I'll read this because it's like part of what they're trying to drive home is that the Salesforce at scale dilemma is a challenge for clients to overcome rather than an inevitable outcome of large scale strategic Salesforce implementations. It is a big issue because Salesforce has become a much more strategic supplier in technology strategies to win, serve, and retain customers. So what they're saying is it's not the end of the world, right? There are ways out of this. There are tools that'll help you get out of this. There are partners, hint, hint, that will help you get out of this. But it's not something that should be swept under the rug, because anybody that knows their Salesforce org knows that more than likely there's a bunch of what we call technical debt sitting in there. If you've had more than one admin, if you've had more than one partner, there is technical debt. If you haven't gotten rid of your process builders, there's technical debt. If you haven't gone in and deleted things ever, yeah, there's technical debt. So, and that's the stuff that you need to be careful of. And again, you don't want to be vanilla with Salesforce, but you also don't want to over customize with Salesforce. And I think that when you do customize something, yeah, this is something real quick, is that the Cassese, right? Let's just say there's no solution for something that you're trying to do. All right. I don't know. Maybe you're trying to, let me think of something that would make sense here. Maybe you're trying to relate a contact with multiple accounts. Okay. Now, before Salesforce came out with account contact relationships, you might have built your own, right? You might have come up with what they call junction object for the developers out there that allows you to do that. But then when the feature gets released from Salesforce, there's a decision point. Do we keep going down the path of our own, or do we move to the one that came from Salesforce? Right. And that, I think, is a decision that more than likely the choice is, well, we are too busy. It's not broken. We're going to keep what we have. And then that gets compounded, and then you eventually can't get out from underneath the burden of all your customizations. So partners, tools, you can get out from underneath it, but it's something to be aware of. I wanted to bring it up. I'm fascinated by the concept just because I see it a lot, and I know that people would be much more excited about using Salesforce if things were a little bit more clean in the environment. I think you'd have faster agility, and when you have faster agility, you have happy users, because when when they're heard and they say, "Hey, it would be nice to have this," and they actually get that, but in like a good amount of time, not 2 years from the time they brought it up, I think it's a good thing all around.
Yeah. You're only preventing. Well, I'll say it this way: you get a lot of, as we are in IT. I consider myself an IT guy. We have lots that we can do. Therefore, we do it, and we turn them on. We flip switches, and without that group as a guiding light to that, we can really create a mess. And finding out you got a mess sooner rather than later is the right time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Derek, what didn't we cover you wanted to cover on this topic?
I think we covered enough. I mean, like I said, there's a lot more that we can dig into on Center of Excellence, maybe at a later time, like, and get into a little bit more detail on what creating that looks like and get some more experiences on it. But yeah, I think from the perspective of what I wanted to get across today, we've covered the article, talked about the Forrester article. So there's some references in there for folks, and really just, you know, the time is now, because when this came out in 2020 it was bad, and it's just getting even worse, right? So the time is now for folks that either own or an admin or whatever part you're in from a Salesforce perspective, to bring this up to the right people in your organization, reach out to partners like XenTegra, and start untangling that web.
Yeah. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but could you go in and do a consult on this, like at any point in time, and walk
Yes.
right through the concept? Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I no doubt. We probably need to get that together and start offering that as some type of package, because that would make a lot of sense. Nobody, just like with our security assessments on Salesforce, nobody should say no to that.
Yeah.
The open up partner coming in and help to shed light on this problem that is, it's either there or it's becoming there, one or the other.
Yeah, and it's the whole concept of COE is something that could even be expanded way beyond just Salesforce, right? It's a methodology concept, it's a governance concept, it's a pretty interesting approach to this issue.
Yeah. Are there people out there that are just centers of excellence consultants that just understand this thing?
I haven't looked to see if there's people that just specialize in that, so I'm not sure, but there may be. But like I said, there's a lot of like Salesforce has a lot of information specifically around Salesforce because obviously it's in their best interest to help customers be successful. And they've seen success with this approach. So, there's trails, there's articles, there's more articles. And I think what happened too, like there's some videos out there as well. Once Forrester came out with this article, it kind of opened the door for some innovation. So you've got, companies like Elements Cloud that are here to address things like that, to help with release management and, put in-app feedback, right? I remember back in the day, I came up with the whole tell it, right? Where, in-app feedback, like give feedback at the time you're using something is so valuable. So all these things will help with user experience, but just because we're in exciting times right now with Salesforce with the whole AI thing and data cloud and all that. I mean, you got to get your house in order before any of that stuff's going to make any sense, right? So this is like step one. Like let's clean the house up a little bit. Let's get a grip on what we're doing, what we have, what we don't need, so that we're setting ourselves up to innovate and take advantage of the next phase that's coming out from an innovation perspective from Salesforce AI. Whatever the next thing is going to be.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, whatever the next thing is going to be, now it's time to get the house organized because you're going to be bringing home new Christmas presents every so often.
Yep.
Hey, Derek, before I let you go, what any ideas on things you want to cover in the upcoming weeks?
So I mean, one of the other things I was going to get into was DevOps. So like how are customers actually doing change management? Like how are you going about adding capabilities to your environment, right? Are you doing stuff just in production? Are you using sandboxes? What's the best approach? Has anybody used the new DevOps from Salesforce? And the reason that I bring that up is because I think that there's opportunity there for customers to be a little bit more agile in the way they develop stuff so that they can have more than one person. They can have a team of developers. They can bring in partners and collaborate and get stuff out the door quicker, right? I'm always looking at like the time to value stuff, right? Like, if it takes 2 years to get something out, that's just takes too long, right? So
Yep.
that's one area. But then, I was also going to do a review. I mean, we just got the spring release. There's a lot of really cool features that they released. So that would be another one. I know there's probably a lot of blog articles already covering that. And then that is another one at some point I want to talk about is what do you do to prep yourself for releases, right? So what do you do to prep yourself for the upcoming release from Salesforce? Do you know that you can go into your org and look at release readiness? Do you know that you can create a sandbox with the new stuff? Like all that, I think that's another one that we'll get into at some point in the next couple podcasts.
Yeah, that's we got these modern day platforms, SaaS based. The releases just keep coming, but that doesn't mean you're ready for them and understand what to expect.
Yeah. And then there'll be some stuff coming out of Trailhead DX, which is the developer conference in March. I'm sure there'll be some announcements, and that's more on the develop. And that's really a lot of what we're talking about here too. Is just maintain and admin and control of the org and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any new, anything new that relates to what we talked about today that comes out of that conference.
Yep. All right, sir. Well, good chatting with you again, and we'll plan to do this again in a week or so.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Derek.
All right.